Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Music Publishing Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dennis Tabensky, and I'm here today with a fellow podcaster in the music business area, Garrett Hope of Composer on Fire, soon to be, well, you can tell us a little bit about what is soon to be. So, Garrett, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad we could make this work. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and what this soon-to-be thing is.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I am a composer, obviously, and I also am a teacher and a podcaster and a coach. And I believe that it's entirely possible for composers, if you write high-quality music, to make a living as a freelance musician, as a freelance composer. And I started my whole journey as a composer on an academic track, and I've been there, I've done that, and I've seen its fantasticness, and I've also seen its seedy underbelly. And I've decided that not to actively pursue any more academic positions. And at the end of my last position I had, came to a close in 2014, I decided I was going to make a go as a composer. And so I was sitting there asking myself, how do you do that? what do you have to know? And I began to realize that you have to think of yourself as being a small business owner and all the things that go along with entrepreneurship and business ownership, and began to study marketing, networking, and business. And I also started a piano tuning business, got certified as a piano tuner, and I run a piano tuning business as well to pay the bills. But as I was going on my journey, I can't escape the fact that I'm a natural born teacher and mentor and coach. So I decided I'd also start a podcast, and through the podcast interview composers and other people to see how they're making it work and their thoughts on music business, and share what I'm learning along the way to help other composers grow in their business, because that's really what I want to do. I want to see composers become successful.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah. And so the podcast I started was called Composer on Fire, and I love it, and it's been great. But I've decided recently to rebrand the whole thing. It's going to be called the Portfolio Composer. And the reason is because I wanted the name to better reflect the mission of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that being a freelance composer, it requires it doesn't require, but most often we build a portfolio of activities that all generate income.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of being a freelancer, and that's part of being self-employed. And so the title, the Portfolio Composer, represents the portfolio of activities, and ideally they're all music-related activities that drive our career forward.
Nice. Yeah. When I first got to know about your podcast, Composer on Fire, I was like, oh, he wears his influences on his sleeve just like I do.
Yes. Yeah, but I over time I've decided I need to, be more specific.
Mm-hmm.
what it is, and I think it's more interesting also.
Yeah. I like the new name, and I think it's going to be good.
Thank you.
We've been for listeners. Garrett and I have been going back and forth about some of this in recent weeks, and I felt good that I was able to save Garrett probably several hours worth of just silly internet stuff that of redirecting from the old site to the new one. I was glad that I know the web stuff that I do, so I can help out a little bit.
Yeah, it was very helpful, very insightful.
So yeah, the podcast. How long have you been doing it?
The podcast launched in February of 2015, so just over a year and a half.
Nice. That's a pretty good run so
Yeah.
far. I haven't gotten through the whole thing yet, but I do enjoy your style. We definitely have
Thanks.
slightly different styles in the way that we do our shows. Yours is a little bit cleaner than mine.
To each their own. Yeah, I think this week will be episode 84, maybe. So
Nice.
there's a lot of episodes, and
Yeah.
I'd like to think that they have gotten stronger. Not
Mm-hmm.
that I would love to go back and redo the first 24 because I have gotten better at what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
I think the nature of this beast is you just sort of dive in. It's the nature of so many things. You dive in and you learn
Yep.
on the fly. There's only so much you can read about and
Oh yeah.
you try to learn as much as you can up front, but then once you're actually in it, it's like anything else. You get your feet wet.
Yeah. Well, and like I was speaking with Seth Hayes this morning for
Mm-hmm.
the Musician's Guide to Hustling.
Mm-hmm.
Done is better than perfect.
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
just do it. And that's I've been living that out in many areas of my life lately. And it's good. It has its rewards.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that is the one of the driving principles in my life. To get it done.
Yeah.
You don't worry too much. Just do it. So you mentioned a particular there was a how do I want to say this? When you were introducing yourself, you said you asked yourself, how do you do that? How do you get out and be a composer that makes a living or who attempts to make a living? So what are some of the things that you do? Um, let's see, you've just had some recent commissions that you finished. What are some of the things that you've done that you think are different from other composers in terms of securing those commissions or securing performances?
I don't know if I've done anything different from anyone else in terms of that.
Mm-hmm.
What I am trying to do is to first just believe it can happen,
Mm-hmm.
and then have the courage to just go out and do things. I've worked really hard this last year to form a new consortium for wind ensemble, for high school wind ensemble.
Nice.
And the commissions I just finished were 2 choral works, one for chorus and strings, and the other just for SATB choir.
Nice.
2 completely different levels of abilities and intent. But the first piece was because some friends, Kurt Connect, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
my another mutual friend of ours, David Von Kampen,
Mm-hmm.
were putting together a concert of new cantatas
Nice.
in the style of, well, not in the style of Bach, but inspired by what Bach would do. And so I wrote a single movement concert opener, an anthem,
Nice.
to go with that. And so this is part of what I'm trying to answer here, because we're just making it happen.
Yeah.
We have a dream of writing music, getting it performed, getting it recorded and done.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than waiting for permission, we're doing the work to make it happen. We've connected with a local Lutheran choir that has a great conductor, Brett Epperson, and building resources and getting our ensemble together. And now they're going to start rehearsing, and the concert will be in November. So
Nice.
this is what I've been learning and what I've been working on a lot in my composition. I still have a lot of growth to do in terms of building a deeper catalog, because that's something else I'm really working hard on right now, because I have my pieces in the areas of music I'm working in, but I need more pieces at varying levels. Specifically, I'm writing for like wind ensembles, educational schools, groups.
Nice.
I know that. Does that make sense? I feel like I kind of blasted through that.
No, that makes sense to me. You're good.
Okay.
So in the things that you do with Composer on Fire, soon to be portfolio composer, and sort of adjacent to that, you do some coaching. You do mentorship type things. Can you talk a little bit about what you do with those and sort of what brought you to do those things? And
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, I feel like part of my natural inclination and who I am as a person is a teacher and a mentor. And despite, Dennis, my best efforts to walk away from teaching, I literally could not escape it. Opportunities come to me. And I think that's a sign that this is something that I'm supposed to be doing. And as I was really digging deep on my journey as a composer, and I wanted to share that through the podcast, I also wanted to use my skills as a mentor and a coach to work with composers,
Mm-hmm.
to help them deal with the mindset issues that go along with the fear of being a business owner, and what does it mean to market and sell yourself, and am I making art or am I making a
Mm-hmm.
product, or what is it? And then teaching basic skills like marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a skill I've really been working on teaching right now. I just developed a new course for it. And so
Yeah.
I I really want to see composers achieve their dream of writing music
Mm-hmm.
and supporting themselves doing so. And I don't believe that there's an easy solution. And I'm not trying. You see all the marketing things online, like how to make six figures in a year or something like that. That would be great.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm not making any of those promises, but there are some things we can apply from the business and entrepreneurship worlds
Mm-hmm.
on how to present ourselves and to solve problems as composers, and how to talk to audiences and niche down into something very specific that allows us to better communicate with audiences and get our music performed.
Nice. Yeah. Talking about thinking as a small business owner, that's something that I totally agree with, and it's an idea that I really hope to help. The two of us can hammer it home with
Yes,
our
we'll make it
shows.
happen.
For people who might not quite understand what that means, how do you interpret an artist thinking as a small business owner?
Well, first, I mean, if you're filing a Schedule C or you receive a 1099
Mm-hmm.
for doing any kind of music related work or compositional work,
Mm-hmm.
and you're filing these things every year with the IRS, the
Mm-hmm.
federal government says that you own a business.
Mm-hmm.
And
Makes
they
sense.
treat it like such.
Mm-hmm.
And I did for decades, and many composers do, just kind of file that Schedule C and plug in the forms in TurboTax or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've learned is that huge parts of the tax code are designed to benefit business owners.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this comes up every electoral cycle, right? Whether it's good or bad. But they're set up, a lot of them, to help the small business owner. So what can we do to make sure that we're utilizing these tools that have been set before us? And I'm not saying that we're looking for loopholes or we're
Mm-hmm.
looking to evade anything, but it's just there are tools in place to help us grow our businesses. And for
Mm-hmm.
composers, that means getting our music performed more and
Mm-hmm.
having the opportunity to write more music for more people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of starts there.
Yeah.
That's first part. But then when you're a business owner, you can create a product or a service. And for musicians, that it's usually service based.
Mm-hmm.
But if no one knows about it, it doesn't matter. And that's where marketing, excuse me, that's where marketing comes in, right? So marketing is just letting people know what's going on and getting your services and products, our music, in front of the people who want to listen to it and want to pay you for it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that one of the things that is it can be a huge barrier for artists of all stripes when it comes to approaching marketing is we have this idea that marketing is sleazy, that
Yes.
marketing is it's the hard sell, it's used car salesmen, it's telemarketers, but marketing is what you just said. It's getting your music in front of the people who are interested in it.
Yeah.
It's
And a
very.
lot of that starts with just identifying your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, what I'm focusing on are high school wind ensembles.
Mm-hmm.
So that audience is comprised of high school students and high school band directors.
Yeah.
So I have to ask myself, well, what are the needs of high school band directors? They need music, but they want music that's engaging their students.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to provide opportunities for enrichment in their classroom, and they have certain pedagogical goals as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of great band scores on the market by
Yeah.
many composers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can add additional value on top of that through Skype rehearsals, which I
Hmm.
learned about from the incredible Alex Shapiro.
Yes, she's fantastic.
And, you know, all these other things we can do to help those directors meet their goals. And I'm helping them meet their needs.
Hmm.
And that's what business is. It's identifying a need and then delivering a product or a service that meets that need. And
Yeah.
music, because it is both an art and a product, is kind of a funny thing to talk about. Like, are we meeting needs? Well, yeah, we are. There's some practicalities, but is it also art that's just supposed to be enjoyed? Absolutely, 100%. And one of the things that I know you like to say is you're making art until it's finished, and then it's a product.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have a score to sell, or you have a recording to sell.
Yeah, you have a catalog of works, and
Mm-hmm.
it's called a catalog for a reason.
Absolutely,
You can
100%.
buy things out of
Uh-huh.
it. Yeah, I think that's another thing that I really try to hammer that because I think it's overlooked by the, there are the composers and artists who are actively they have an active antipathy toward the idea of entrepreneurship or thinking like a business, and I think that's one point that they overlook or don't want to see is
Mm-hmm.
that yeah, it's still art. It also becomes a product once it's finished.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And I don't know if you, I mean, let me just say here that no matter what kind of music you write, there's an audience out there for it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
because of the beauty of the internet, we can find those people with so much ease now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas 20, 25 years ago, it would have been nearly impossible. You
Yeah.
would have had to find people in your location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But no matter how esoteric or avant-garde or whatever your music happens to be,
Mm-hmm.
there's somebody who wants it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Somebody wants to listen to it. Somebody wants to perform it.
they're willing to pay you for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe strongly in Kevin Kelly's theory of the 1,000 true fans,
Yeah.
where if you have all you need is an audience of 1,000 dedicated fans who will follow you, buy what you're making,
Mm-hmm.
and you can make a good living.
Yeah. Totally. I think some of us, I think, also forget when it comes to, uh, finding your audience and having people who are willing to pay you for your art, especially when it's slightly more esoteric type styles of music. I mean, just look at the music that you listen to. Look at the CDs that you buy. Look at the stuff
Yeah.
that you actively consume and pay for. Are you the only one? No, absolutely not. Did somebody make that CD? Then they knew that there's a market for it, and if your music is like that, then there's a market for your music as well. It's the same people who bought that CD or the same people who are at that concert with music that is like yours.
Yeah. Well, and you were on the webinar I hosted just an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
One of the other composers that's working through my course right now, his audience is choral music. He's working on choral music.
Hmm.
And he started surveying his audience, and he found out that a large portion of this very active and really responsive audience are middle school directors.
Yeah,
And he was able to learn exactly what they need in their classroom.
which is
So
fantastic.
as a composer, it's a gold mine. You have all these composers or conductors, and they represent probably a majority of middle school choir directors across the nation.
Hmm.
And if they're all saying similar things, all he has to do is deliver on that, and he
Yeah.
can continue to make his art. And now he has people who want to buy his scores
Hmm.
and perform it.
Yeah,
And that's the dream,
Yeah.
right? And that's what I want to help people do.
nice. So you've mentioned a few times the course that you're working on. I've been one of your beta people on that. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with that and where we can find it when it's ready.
Absolutely. So the course, with all not very creatively, is called Marketing for Composers.
Gasp.
Ah! And when I was doing the podcast early on, I was surveying composers and I was asking, well, what are your biggest problems? And overwhelmingly, the answer was, I just don't know how to get people to listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or they will have some success in school, they might win an award, and we all hope that that's going to be a springboard into bigger and better things.
Mm-hmm.
And often it's not, unless you know then how to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And like I was just saying, marketing is all about getting your music in front of your audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so this course is designed to help people identify their audience, learn how to find what their needs are, and to speak to them in a way that communicates and builds relationships, and then gets your music in front of them. So this course is designed to teach composers the basics of marketing and to see people really get their music in front of the people who want to pay them for it. And if you really focus down on a specific group and how you can meet the needs of that group, which is your niche,
Mm-hmm.
you can. It's easier to get traction in your group.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that you need, like, people get wary, like, oh, am I just going to be a choral composer? Am I just going to be the guy who does unaccompanied flute, whatever, or kazoo solos? No, I mean, this is a process that's ongoing throughout your life, and it's iterative, right?
Mm-hmm.
You try one thing and it works, or it doesn't work, or maybe you're ready to move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
Or as the opportunities come up, you can switch. But these basic marketing skills are transferable to the whole music sphere. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm speaking specifically to composers, and I'm addressing the issues of composers, but any musician, these things apply to. Oh, and to answer your last question, marketingforcomposers.com. That's where you can go. But the best place is to sign up for the newsletter at theportfoliocomposer.com. That's where I give a lot of insights and help, and where I talk about the course a lot.
Nice. And that's launching in September, right?
Yes, the course will launch in early September. So get on the list now so that you can be aware of that, and you'll be able to get in on the first round.
Nice. That's great. It's been fun going through the course. I'm about halfway through right now, going through and giving you feedback.
Which I really appreciate. I just was speaking about done is better than perfect, right? So as I built the course, I did a lot of reading, a lot of thinking, hours and hours and hours and hours. And if I had sat down and treated this like creating a magnum opus, I would have never gotten it done.
Oh, yeah.
So I just created it, and then I got beta users in there to give me feedback, and now I can iterate and make it even better. And that's the point, because I want to make something useful. So composers like you are going through it and telling me, helping me identify the issues so that I can make this as useful and applicable and full of action for composers.
Nice.
That's what I want to do. I want to see composers have success.
Yeah, it's not a matter of it's not this zero-sum thing that a lot of people, I think, are wary of, that we're going to hoard all the commissions for ourselves. It's no, the rising tide raises all boats.
Raises all boats. Yep.
So by helping other composers, you're not just helping an individual, you're helping really the whole community. Yeah,
I mean, if we're all working hard to raise what we're doing in terms of our business, that benefits everyone, primarily because we can then be compensated in an appropriate way. Right? We often in music fight a race towards the bottom, race towards free, especially with digital products. And so the value comes from the human relationships. And if all composers are working hard, then you're good. Now, the content of the course, there's really, you could go and get all the marketing books you want and study, and that's how I learned it, and try it on your own. But the real value comes through the one-on-one and group experiences with me, because I will walk you through this. I will be there to answer questions and host webinars. And so far, the interaction has been just fantastic.
Nice.
And really helping people think through these issues. There have been questions about what does it mean what my audience is, and thinking about what draws people into the music I'm doing, or what pushes them away. these are all really big issues that we usually don't think about. And like you said,
Mhm.
we have barriers set up, or we create them in our culture about
Yeah.
marketing music and selling yourself.
Mm-hmm. Selling out.
Yeah.
What?
If you aren't interested in making money writing music, then this is not the course for you,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And maybe you're just a hobbyist, or maybe you write music in an academic setting and you're completely financially supported 100% that way, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to make money through marketing your music.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even then, the ideas of audience and communication are timeless and invaluable.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't necessarily have to have a financial goal in mind. It can just be getting your music in front of people and
Yep.
getting just a larger audience, whether you want money or not.
Hmm.
You do want your music in people's ears.
Yeah, well, I do.
Yeah,
And I
I do too.
believe music is extremely powerful, and I think it can be a transformative experience. And I want
Mm,
to lead people into those transformative experiences. And part of what I do through my music is trying to heal wounded people or to shine a light in dark areas. And
mm,
I can't do that if people don't know about my music and they
yeah,
can't listen to it. So
yeah,
I have to be able to market it.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I want to make an impact and leave a legacy.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that right there is really important, an important thing to think about, and it's something that I'm an idea that I'm going to start pushing in a larger way. I think with this show and with the new show that I just started recording yesterday,
Woohoo.
the idea, yay, two episodes recorded, um, the idea of legacy and actively thinking about your legacy. It's I really it didn't strike me that that was something to think about until I read David Cutler's The Savvy Musician. He has a whole section in there on thinking about your legacy, and yeah, we all want you know, it's very easy to say I want my legacy to be that he wrote good music,
Uh-huh.
but we all want that.
We all want that.
It's not, it doesn't set you apart in any way, but thinking about your legacy, you know, for the two of us, very clearly we want our legacy to include you know, the things we do here, the education,
Yeah.
the helping, the generosity. We want that to be a part of how we are remembered,
Yeah.
and that's something that sets us apart in that respect. And you know, I think some of the greatest musicians of the 20th century, part of their legacy is their teaching, is the
Mm.
ways that they gave to the community. I mean, if you look at Aaron Copland, he's called the Dean of American Music because he helped so many young composers. It's a major part of how he's remembered.
Yeah.
In addition to being a good composer, he wrote good music.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Though, you know, I know some people are like, oh, Copeland, but I
Hey,
think he
well,
wrote good music.
he's still getting played every year. And that
Yep.
says something,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's meeting a need of people's interest in music. And you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I think legacy is super important. I I would love for people to be playing my music 400 years from now.
Yeah.
The reality is that's probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can't write music for an audience 400 years from now either,
Yeah.
I can write music for the people I know right here
Mm-hmm.
today and help them deal with their lives or
Yeah.
whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And that's my legacy. You know,
Nice. Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to impact the
Exactly.
world. But and like you said, I'm also trying to have a legacy through the podcast and the course and to just provide value to composers. And I think this is true for you too. We want to be resources for people
Yeah.
where
Absolutely.
we can answer these questions. I mean, I have all these degrees and I've got a doctorate in composition and I learned a lot and did a lot of growth. And I was fortunate enough to even get pedagogical training, like how to teach. Not everyone
Mm-hmm.
even gets that, but
Yeah.
we didn't get any business classes. I mean, some schools are really starting to dig into that, and
Yeah.
it's great. Um, but there's so many questions on how do you go out into the world once you know how to do this.
Hmm.
And I believe that you can make your own opportunities,
Yeah.
because if you're in the traditional path of master's degree, doctorate degree, apply for an academic job, or if you're a performer,
Hmm.
you go and you do your summer festivals and you get your performance degree, and then you start auditioning. Well, there's only so many ensembles and so many seats,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
competition is stiff.
Hmm.
But you can make your own opportunities.
Hmm.
And I think if you think like a business person, you can find those opportunities and execute on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've talked about this before. My original idea for my path was to do undergrad, grad, doctorate, teach.
Mm-hmm.
And I got diverted after undergrad and ended up, in New York. And I started a concert series, and I realized that that sort of a thing was actually my path,
Yeah,
because there's so many opportunities that can be created there. Not that the other path is, you know, is bad.
not
It's
at all.
necessary for so many people, just to continue the craft and the traditions that we're working within. But yeah, I realized that, yeah, making opportunities for myself, and in the process making opportunities for other composers and performers,
Yeah.
starting a concert series, now recording other artists' work, and that's a much more, I think, healthy path for me, and it's a much more fulfilling path for me.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to say anyone shouldn't take that long-term academic track, but you just need to acknowledge the fact that there's no guarantee of a job once you're done.
Yeah.
But if you take the skills and tools that you're learning and the
Mm-hmm.
resources you've built and the network that you've amassed, you can create an enormous amount of possibilities and
Mm-hmm.
options for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to think broadly. And if you have an audience in mind, whether that's an ensemble or a performing style or group or instrument, or even the people who are in the seats,
Mm-hmm.
then you know how to get your music in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And this all comes back to marketing again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with whatever path you take, I think, like with any choice you make with your art, with your business, you have to know why you're doing it. So if
Hmm.
you want to take that academic path, you should be able to answer to yourself, why do I want this? And
Yeah.
answer clearly and honestly. And sometimes those are difficult ways to answer that question. You
Mm.
can't always be clear in your answer, and sometimes you're not honest, and you don't know that you're not being honest about your answer. But maybe you've been conditioned to think this is what I need to do, whether it's take the academic path or take a different path. Um, that's something that I've been hearing a lot in some of the podcasts that I'm listening to, is know your why.
Yeah.
Know why you're doing everything you're doing, because it's not only are you going to be able to be more effective in the way you go forward, but you'll know if you're making the right choices.
Yes. Isn't it Simon Sinek who has that great TED talk, Start with Why? I think he also has a book called Start with Why.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, find the TED talk, Simon Sinek. I think it's Sinek.
Okay.
And he talks about that. And he's speaking primarily to like Silicon Valley startups.
Mm-hmm.
But what he's saying is absolutely applicable to musicians and composers.
Yeah, totally. That's something that came up with Megan Enan, on the audio feed. It'll be 2 weeks ago. If you're watching live, it was last week. We talked a bit about learning from other areas, learning
Yeah.
from outside of music. I look a lot to the book publishing world, and just you can learn so much from other areas just by knowing what they talk about,
Hmm.
and just you don't have to dive super deep into another field, but you can start to learn how they operate and say, oh, that actually works over here too. You know,
Oh yeah.
I can take that and tweak it and make it work for me in a really effective and interesting way.
Yeah. And that helps you also stand out from the crowd, because if you're doing what everyone else is doing, you'll get the same results, right? But
Hmm.
if you want to get an extraordinary result, sometimes you need to just do what no one else is doing.
Yeah.
And looking to another industry can be a great way to get inspiration.
Yeah, totally.
But as a composer, I do that too. Like I'll read books on poetry, or I will, watch a dance concert.
Hmm.
All the and those are closely related to music, but I find so much inspiration, or just reading a biography, or
Yeah.
reading a great article about this cool science that's happening.
Hmm.
That inspires me,
Yeah.
and creatively as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I find a lot of inspiration in reading biographies of non-musicians.
Yeah.
Typically artists, but there's one in particular that, I mean, it's been years since I read it, so it could actually be a terrible book. But I read the biography of Misia Sert. That
Okay.
was one of her many last names. She was an arts philanthropist, a patron of the arts in turn of the century Paris,
Nice.
and learning about all that all of her connections to Toulouse-Lautrec and Stravinsky, and just this whole wide range of musicians and painters and writers. I found it incredibly inspiring, and I learned so much about my own craft by reading about this woman who kind of knew everybody.
Oh wow. Yeah. Kind of how to be a networker too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really gave me a sense that there's so many points of connection that
Hmm.
you can you want to build those connections, and they can all bear fruit in exciting and interesting ways.
Sure. I just read this good biography about Abraham Lincoln called, I think, Team of Rivals.
Mm.
And it's all about how he took all his political opponents who were racing for the presidency
Hmm.
against him and turned them into his presidential cabinet.
Nice.
And it's a great, lots of lessons about leadership
Hmm.
and dealing with conflicting personalities, but also inviting and growing through heavy and hard critique.
Hmm.
And some of the most poignant lessons for me were reading through the letters he wrote to his political opponents and challengers, because he was so savvy and he
Hmm.
could navigate these really tricky political passages that would have been landmines that
Hmm.
some of today's political candidates would have just blundered straight through, and it would have been pure disaster.
Yeah.
He had this great way of speaking truth and getting people to buy into his big vision,
Hmm.
which he saw happen by the
Yeah.
end of the Civil War. But there were
Hmm.
people in his cabinet who didn't agree with all his decisions.
Hmm.
And it's just a great book on leadership and communication.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was really, like, these kinds of things. They're all about us in the world, and if you are willing and open to see the abundance and the lessons that are out there,
Hmm.
there's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, and to surround yourself with different viewpoints, because there's so much you can learn from that,
Yeah,
from other artists or non-artists, to learn how they operate in the world, and to learn from their successes, their failures, and their experience.
yeah. And I think that you can take away something from everything.
Hmm.
And people who listen to my podcast, they should know that one of the greatest joys for me is that learning that there are as many ways to find success as a composer as there are interviews that I have on the show.
Yeah.
And if someone listens to a podcast and says, "Well, I can do that too. That'll work for me," then I've considered it successful.
Yeah. Yeah,
And not everything will work for everybody.
yeah, and that comes back a little bit to if something works for someone else, you can learn from that, and you can adapt it to your own ends, but at the same time know why you're doing that, not just because it
Yeah.
worked for so and so, but because it could work for you for these reasons, not just because it worked for them, so it'll work for me.
Yep. Yeah. There's lots of things to be learned.
Yeah. Nice. So I'm sort of interested in, I just want to get into little nuts and bolts things, if you don't mind, of how you do your podcast. What is your process? I'm new at mine, and I'm still trying to learn stuff. But I think it's also interesting to see a little bit behind the curtain.
So, like, the technical side or
Uh,
the
how
logistical side?
a little bit. How do you like where do you find your guests? How do you bring them in? And how do you how do you what's your philosophy for the show, and how you run it?
Sure. Well, the overall mission of the show is to help composers with the business end of writing music through mindset, marketing, and other business skills. So with that goal in mind, I'm looking for people who are out in the world doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's composers, but not just composers, performers, authors, thinkers of all types I'm interested in. In fact, this week's episode will be with a violinist. Really good conversation. And it started with me just reaching out to people in my network. Like, who did I know?
Yeah.
And because I'm come from the academic world and I have a lot of experience with choral music, the first several episodes were very academic and choral heavy. But that's not 100%, but that's kind of where it was. And one of the things I did is, as I would wrap these interviews up, I would ask the people I'd spoken with for referrals. And it's just snowballed. And I've developed some relationships with some record labels and PR firms, and they will send me referrals for stuff that their composers are doing or their performers. And I have enough interviews now that I could go for 2 months without doing another one. So I've been able to take a little bit of a break this last month.
Nice.
But it's always exciting. There are so many interesting people doing fantastic and fascinating things. So once I get in touch with them, we find a time that's mutually agreeable, and then we have a conversation. And I like to focus it around issues of music business, though. I will also follow up on interesting things that they've said. So sometimes we can go on some great tangents.
Nice.
Does that kind of what you were looking for?
Yeah,
Okay.
I like that. And I just had a thing. I feel like I do this every other episode where I don't write down a question that I wanted to ask, and then it's gone.
Oh man, that's my whole life. Yep. I do the interviews over Skype primarily.
Okay, cool.
And then I record them into Pro Tools, and so that I can do the editing. And so I try to make sure all the interviewees sound as smart as possible. But you have to leave in a significant amount of ums and ahs and vocal pauses.
Yeah.
I was speaking with a guy who does editing for documentaries, and he said if you take them all out, it sounds scripted and unreal. And I want this to be a real conversation.
Yeah.
But there are also extraneous things, or people might say something that they don't want to be put out into the world.
Yeah.
So we can edit those.
Yeah. So far, I've only had to do that once. And I said something that I shouldn't have said.
Right. But it's a great joy for me. I like the process a lot, and then putting it out there. And one of the things I've done to build the podcast, and I wanted my presentation to be as professional as possible. And I have quite a bit of experience in Pro Tools and doing sound design and engineering. So that side of it was easy, but I outsourced my voiceover work. I wanted it to sound kind of radio
Yeah.
friendly, radio ready. So
Nice.
I outsourced to couple actors to do different levels of voiceover, and
Nice.
just redid all those for the new rebrand of the podcast.
Oh,
So
cool, cool.
yeah, it's all fun.
Yeah, I've gotta start figuring out. Did a bird just run into the window? I've got to start thinking, sorry, random thing about having
Birds
a
committing
whole,
suicide right
yeah, a
next
whole
to you.
like wall of windows here. For those of you who watch the videos, you obviously it's a new backdrop this week. I'm in Montauk. Haha. Yay! Hooray for in-laws. So yeah, I've got to start thinking about that with the new show, getting the new music and figuring out who's going to do the original or the initial voiceover. The voiceover for this show is my husband.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, and he also wrote that music.
No, I was wondering where that came from.
Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
I like, obviously I like it a lot. Yeah, that's damn bird just made me lose my train of thought again. See, and I leave these things in. I don't edit them out unless it's a really long pause where I go, which I've done.
Yes, I've done that too. Total brain fart right in the middle of an
Yeah.
interview.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Yep.
Now I've been thinking about this sort of a thing for a while. When it comes to composers sort of doing marketing themselves in a non-musical way. So for example, we both talked to Alex Shapiro,
Hmm.
and she talked about her blog, Notes from the Kelp,
Yeah.
and how that is a way of her connecting to her audience and doing something interesting for them that's not constantly beating them over the head with their music, which I think is a really nice way of connecting, a really kind of elegant way of bringing people in and on a very personal level. Is that a part of what you of your philosophy for when you teach? Is that something that you talk about with your with your people that you coach?
Yeah, I think because a significant part of what we do, I mean, we're in the relationship business.
Mm-hmm.
Music is all about having relationships, and a relationship is formed when you have a shared experience. And it's not about who's getting what or who's scratching what, who's
Mm-hmm.
back.
Yeah.
It's about doing life together.
Mm-hmm.
And what Alex does so brilliantly is she invites people into her life.
Mm-hmm.
And so many incredible photos of her composition studio and
Mm-hmm.
what she sees out her window, this wildlife. Yeah, I don't know how she writes a single note. I would
I
just be
know.
looking
Just
outside the
staring.
window. Yeah, so when I got to interview her, I got to go to her home,
Yeah.
and we sat there, and I got to face the window. So every once in a while, a bald eagle would fly by, and it's like, yeah, what was that you were saying?
Yeah.
Like,
What were you talking about?
right. And so when she does this, she's providing this shared experience, and she's
Mm-hmm.
building a relationship that goes above and beyond the music itself. And I think
Yeah.
that's really what it's about. And I do go into that, and that I think is providing value.
Mm-hmm.
That's the human interaction that makes her music much more valuable
Yeah.
than just the notes on the page.
Mm-hmm.
It's who she is. And I think that's who we need to be, and we need to cultivate that. Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Do you have any particular ways of going about that that you typically either that you use as examples that you or that you think might be good for people to attempt if that's the sort of thing that they want to do?
Oh, well, first of all, you just need to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, faking it is exhausting,
Yeah.
and it's not worth the effort.
No.
What part of the reason Alex is so successful is because she genuinely loves nature,
Mm-hmm.
and she is head over heels for what she gets to see every day,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes across.
Yeah, totally.
Um, if you need to, and this is part of audience building as well. When
Mm-hmm.
you are genuine and you are just communicating your passion through life and bringing people into your process, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
People want to know what's happening. I mean, I think for non-composers and most non-musicians, the musical process and the creative process is a complete mystery.
Yeah.
And so through your blog or your video series or what you post on social media,
Mm-hmm.
people will want to know what you're doing. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could show your process as how you've developed this theme or what you're working on, and that
Yeah.
can be scary and hard. Um, but I think that's a great place to start, is just letting people know what you're doing, and letting them see the process.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guilty of this too, but so often we try to build these audiences and we communicate with them, and then there are these moments of lull and silence, and all of a sudden, I've got something new, here it
Yeah.
is, and we just expect people to dive right in.
Yeah.
But if that whole time I was developing this new thing, I was saying, hey, I'm working on this, I'm
Mm-hmm.
really excited about it,
Mm-hmm.
and then a week later you could be like, well, here's an 8-bar clip of what I were working on.
Yeah.
People will want to know about it,
Yeah.
right? Or you can even just present your problems. You could say, I'm trying to schedule a concert for this time of the year in this
Mm-hmm.
city, and I guarantee you people will help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
And
think good.
that's that's everything we're talking about, is building that relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
you can definitely start there, letting people into your process, being genuine with who you are, and talking to the people who are interested in your music, or who you
Yeah.
want to be interested in your music.
Yeah, yeah. I one thing that I'm attempting to do, it's not a public thing, but I have a password protected blog where I write about my process. You know, as I'm writing a piece, you know, when I finish writing for the day, I sit down and it's sort of like journaling. Just this is what I wrote. This is this is my challenge for the day. Like I ran into a wall here, and I can talk out the problems that I've had, and my plan ultimately is to make these essentially DVD extras, so that you know every time I write about you know if I'm writing about this bassoon piece that I'm writing, ways we come apart, I tag it ways we come apart, and when I'm done with the piece, I can click on that tag, highlight all the bits about the piece, compile it in a nice little Word document, and stick it at the end of the score.
Yeah, and then it's a little document about your journey as you
Yeah,
created it.
yeah, and you
Yeah.
know this could be a public thing of doing public development diaries of your works. Andre Gide used he journaled, he wrote diaries as he was writing his novels, and sometimes they're actually published with the book, which is pretty cool.
Really?
And I so like the Counterfeiters, when I read that ages ago, there was this great chunk at the end that was how he wrote the book. And I think and I feel so much closer to that novel and to him because I saw that, you know, that his process laid out
Yeah.
after the fact. And I think, you know, people can do that with their blog, or they can just, you know, make it that little DVD extra in their scores. Yeah, and one thing that has sort of struck me as well is, as you're writing a piece, if it's inspired by nature, or if it's inspired by
Hmm.
celestial bodies or something, and you're having to do some research into that, share your research.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
stuff's cool too. Like you're writing a piece about, you know, pulsars and quasars or something, and you share the things that you've read. I'll read that. I think that stuff's cool, and I'm gonna be more interested in the music that you're writing because I know what you're you know
Yeah.
what inspired you.
And I need to be better about that too. part of it is just this fear. Like no one really wants to know what I'm thinking and going through, or at least for me, I don't want to be the kind of person who's posting every 5 minutes
Yeah.
either, and I don't want to flood people or get people annoyed with me.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that my audience does want to know what's happening, and I think you
Yeah.
can post once a day, and you can be.
Yeah.
It can all
Totally.
be fantastic.
Yeah.
And letting people know, drawing them in to you, and getting excitement built.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the people I listen to, the email lists I subscribe to, and the podcasts and the books I read, when they do this, when they're like, hey, I'm trying this, I'm thinking this, I'm reading this book, I'm instantly more interested because they're doing the curation for me.
Mm-hmm.
People who I like, and I like how they're thinking,
Mm-hmm.
are telling me what they're thinking and they like.
Yeah.
Which is like a huge thumbs up for me.
Exactly.
And that actually, we can kind of bring this all the way back to where we started with the music business stuff, because people buy music and engage with those that they like, know, and trust.
Yeah.
So how can you get people to like you or know more about you or trust what you can put out if you're not putting things out?
Mm-hmm.
And if you are out there showing your process and doing these things, you're hitting all three of those areas. You're letting people will like you, and if they don't like you, then that's not the people you want in your audience anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they get to know you because you're revealing yourself. Just like you can get a pretty good idea of who Alex Shapiro is as a person by reading through her blog.
Oh, absolutely.
And she's a lovely person.
Yeah.
And that completely shows through.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can build trust, right? Like this person is sending all the links they put out go to quality material. And the sound clips they put on of their music, they all sound good. I can trust that the music they're going to create is going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are good steps.
Yeah, yeah. And by being genuine, you're being a little bit vulnerable, and people can sense when you're being genuine and when you're being kind of straight-laced and this is how I present myself. This is the facade. They can tell when you're doing that, and they can also tell when you're being a person, and that's the best. Again, to bring it around, that's the best kind of marketing.
Yeah.
Is when you are absolutely you, and you're sharing yourself.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think there's any room for deception or lying in this business. And you don't want to be that person anyway.
Oh, yeah. Nobody's going to want to know you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, if we're in the relationship business, I don't want to have a relationship with anyone who I can't trust.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with composers who are long dead, we can look at Wagner and we can say, yeah, he was a pretty bad guy, but he wrote some great music. But now, if you're operating in the world today, you're not going to get that, oh, but he writes really great music. Probably. Yeah. If you're
it's not if you're starting out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guarantee you, for the people who were giving Wagner money, who were funding what he was doing, he was not being a jerk.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right? You can't bite the hand that feeds you.
No, certainly not.
Yeah, even though, but I mean, they probably would have ascribed to his philosophies in general, I would think.
Probably. Yeah. There's a biography that I have not read, and I'm sure it would be a very interesting read.
Well, maybe that's your next project.
Could be. Well, we're coming up on the hour mark here. We're pretty much right at it. So is there anything else you want to add? Any little tips that you think composers and performers should know in terms of maybe marketing their works or just business ideas in general? Something that you think is maybe overlooked?
Oh, something that's overlooked. That's a good question. I think, and Dennis, I think you would agree with me on this 100%, is make sure that you have a really good looking website that's functional and easy to navigate. Um, you and I have spoken about this in the past, and we've both actually done podcast episodes that discuss in length the benefits of having good websites. Yours with Alex Gardner and mine with Arthur Brewer. But it's so vital.
Yeah.
And I have looked at so many bad composer websites that are non-functional, which meaning I can't find what I'm looking for, or the links don't work, and they just look bad. And there is no excuse for having an aesthetically poor website at this point. It's just so easy. And we live in this extremely visual culture. And if you want people to engage with you, you have to engage with them even on the visual level. And that might be a complete mind melt for you because you're a sound artist, not a visual artist. But that's when you need to hire a designer to say, help me.
Yeah.
And so having it aesthetically beautiful, have it functional, and have high quality examples of your music. And make it easy to get in touch with you. Don't bury the contact button.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, this whole thing is about building relationships, and you can't build relationships if people can't contact you.
Right. Yep. Yes. And go out there and start engaging the people who are listening to you. Reveal your process. And that's the first step, I think, in raising awareness of your music and the marketing. Letting people know what you're doing.
Totally.
So that they can engage with you and with the music.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So now where can people find you? And we should remind people where the course will be and when it launches.
Sure. Well, the podcast is The Portfolio Composer, and you can go to theportfoliocomposer.com, or you can find it in any podcast app or catcher out there. It's going to be there.
Nice.
My personal website is garretthope.com, 2 R's, 2 T's. And at the Portfolio Composer, you can learn more about the course and when it'll be opened, but you can also learn more about that by going to marketingforcomposers.com. That was a lot of action steps right there. But if I was going to boil it down to one thing, go to theportfoliocomposer.com and sign up for the newsletter. That way you're going to get the biggest picture, and you'll be on top of all the news. And you'll get a whole bunch of great things from me.
Nice. Yeah, and you do a good newsletter.
Thank you.
It's a good one. I like it.
Hey, well, I'm learning from you a lot too here, so you're helping me make it better. And it's going to launch early September.
Sweet.
The course will launch early September, and you will get a whole bunch of interaction with me to help you work through these things and do some heavy thinking, because it does require quite a bit of thinking. This is engagement.
Yeah, and I can say I sat in on one of these the group things today, and it was really great. It was really cool to see you in action, working with some composers and to figure out what they need to do.
Thanks.
That was great. So yeah, thank you for being here today. I appreciate your coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. And your audience needs to keep their ears open, because you're going to be on my show too soon.
Exactly. I'll be pushing that episode when that happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody. Well, when the course comes out, you're going to let me know, and I'll make a point of putting that on the Music Publishing Podcast Facebook page and Twitter feed, so that people who listen here can know when that's ready.
Great. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, everybody, make sure you follow or like whatever it is on Facebook, the Music Publishing Podcast page, so that you can get that information when it's ready, and you can know when the next couple of episodes come out. Next, you can look forward to hearing from Rose Marshak, who teaches music business at my alma mater, Illinois State University. Daniel Gilliam is coming up to talk about classical radio, and we'll have the Rhymes with Opera folks.
Nice.
I think all of them, all 5 of them, will be on.
Wow.
That'll be a fun logistical nightmare. So yeah, everybody check out check out Garrett's podcast and do the music publishing podcast Facebook page. And I will see you next week.
All right. Thanks.